Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode that I chose the title to be one of my amazing guests' coloring book for children. This is how impressed I am by Matt Gilhooly's wonderful work. Now, I only bring people here that are leaving quite an imprint on me, that are giving me some food for thought and that are inspiring me. But you'll see why I am enjoying Matt's work so much. A bit about my personal experience with Matt until I give you some insights on his biography and his achievements. I was very privileged to hear Matt host some very interesting people that I got to learn about more and that I admire. And boy, is he an amazing podcaster, because yes, he is a fellow podcaster, and some of his great episodes can be found on the Life Shift podcast. A bit about Matt. He is a creator, and I truly enjoyed reading your biography, Matt, because you are giving some really interesting tips on conversation and on communication, which I know that are some of your wonderful skills. No wonder. The Life Shift podcast, as Matt says, began as an experiment, but you learn about it in just a few moments from Matt. He enjoys designing content such as communication materials, coloring books, digital art, pitch meeting presentations, keynote speaking engagements, and other forms of media. In every experience, he relies on his ability to communicate with various audiences in ways that cater to the needs and desires of each individual. I truly enjoy learning this about Matt. Welcome, Matt. Great to have you here with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I told you before we started recording, I'm not great with compliments, so thank you for those.
Great to have you here. And before we get into many of my curiosities about you, Matt, about mental health, about grieving, because you have had quite a journey. Can you please tell us, who is Matt Gilhooly?
That's a loaded question. I think, Matt Gilhooly, I am a podcaster. I think I'm going to go with podcaster. I'm also an educator as, my real job, I guess, but podcasting has really grabbed my heart and soul, essentially, and kind of leaning into that. And my podcast really stems from my own personal experience. And it took me a long time to become this version of me, based on those experiences. And I think that long journey has kind of created my ability to have these conversations with people on the podcast about sometimes really deeply personal situations in their lives. And what I want it to sound like and what I want it to be is kind of like if you were to overhear two people having a really deep conversation in like a coffee shop or something and asking the questions that many of us grew up too afraid to ask. I think a lot of times when we have human interactions with people, for instance, if someone says, "How are you today?" most people will respond with "Good, how are you?" But if they really responded, it might not be "Good, how are you?" It might be, I'm not really having a great day today. But the other person typically isn't prepared for that response, right? And how do we react to that? And so when I go into these conversations on the Life Shift podcast, I try to ask these tough questions that maybe they weren't asked before, or ask about them in a different way in hopes that we can uncover something so that when a listener is listening, they don't really feel alone in their circumstance, or something can resonate with them, even if it's not the same story, but something will connect and they'll feel more a part of humanity and a part of the community. So that was a long way of saying I'm a podcaster.
I enjoy it. Thank you for sharing. On your podcast, what really got my attention was when you were the host, you had Matt Labrie, which we truly get inspired by on a regular basis. And even though you were the one asking the questions, you got very vulnerable, you got very open about your own journey with grief and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, Matt, if you could share with us, how do you feel about grief now after you had quite an experience of losing your mother and your grandmother?
Uh, I I feel good about grief now. I often tell people that I give myself the like that I'm an expert in grief now because of how much I failed when my mom died. So, my story, when I was 8, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that point, my life completely changed from that moment. It was my life shift. And so that's kind of like why the show is called what it is, because after that moment, it was late 80s, early 90s. The people around me did not have the tools to help me. Society didn't really have the tools. So there was not a lot of talk about mental health. There was not a lot of talk about therapy for anyone really. Usually, you went to therapy. So like almost like going to the doctor, you go a couple times and you're good. So no one really was able to help me through that journey. And I kind of attached myself to perfectionism and trying to prove that I was okay to everyone else because, in that 8-year-old brain of mine, my mother abandoned me. Wasn't intentional, right? But she died. And so 8-year-old doesn't understand that it's an abandonment. And so my mind immediately went to, I need to do everything right so that my dad doesn't leave, so that my grandmother doesn't leave, so that all these people around me can see that I'm okay. And that didn't serve me very well long term, right? Long term, there was a lot of things that come up with that, leads you into depression, denial, all these other things, that anxiety, things that didn't necessarily serve me well and probably wouldn't have happened had I had the opportunity to grieve properly. So 20 years of that, until one moment in therapy when I was in my 30s, going through like 5 different therapists, trying to figure out what this world is doing to me and how I can get out of this whirlwind and the tornado that I would kind of created for myself. My therapist was like, you realize that every single decision that you've made your entire life since she died was with that 8-year-old brain. And that was when the doors kind of opened. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And that was kind of when I started to unravel that grief process and kind of go through it with my mom. And people don't like when I say this, but I feel like I closed the door on grief with my mom shortly after that because I understood it all. Everything made sense. But because of that, because of the long journey of grief with my mom and everything, looking back, like I failed, like I just didn't do it right, which I don't know. That's not real. I think everyone has a different grief journey. But my grandmother, who kind of became my mom, she got diagnosed with lung cancer. And so I knew that that was probably going to eventually take her. And so from that moment, I knew I had to do something differently because I wasn't given the tools when I was a kid. Now I have the tools. So I approached her passing and the years that it took completely different. And when she took her last breath, I was there. I was there for the final 96 hours of my grandmother's life, sitting next to her, telling her that whenever she was ready, she could go. And when she died, I watched it, it was, and I felt like honored to be there. I felt like this was a really special moment. She was there when I don't know if she was in the hospital room, but she was there when I was born, close to the first times that I took my breaths. And how lucky am I to be able to be there for her at the end of hers? And when she died, it felt different. I was sad, of course, right? I just lost like my best friend and another mother in my life. But at the same time, I had the tools to understand what I needed to do to reflect on that. And move forward in a way that I could not be sad about her death, but be happy about all the other parts. Whereas growing up, I was so sad about, I don't know if I was sad, I was upset about not having a mom. And I just used that to fuel anger, to fuel depression, to fuel anxiety. And I didn't really focus on any of the good moments. It was more the bad moments of her dying. And so this time I was able to move forward. And so, again, a really long-winded way, but I'm letting you feel that piece. But I think grief is crazy. I think grief is important. I think grief is necessary. And I think grief is 100% different for everyone else. Like that journey has to be your own. You have to own it. You have to find a way that makes sense for you. You also have to be in it because it sucks and it's hard and it's very difficult to be in it, but it's so very necessary to help you get out of it, right? So that's my really long way of saying, how do I feel about grief? It's a blessing. I'm very grateful for my grief journeys, both of them.
Wow, and let me tell you, I am too. And I did not expect I'd cry, but you touched a chord there, and I'm so grateful that you mentioned this, and you mentioned some tools, and I think that I could use them. Personally, in this moment, I think I'm still not fully processing some people that I have lost, because this is why I got emotional. This is why I was so drawn to you talking to Matt about this. What would you say that the best tools to deal with grief would be?
I don't know that there are specific tools that I would say. I would say that the most effective quote unquote tool that I used that serves me the best is to honor how you are feeling at any moment in time. Because I think we put a lot of shame on certain emotions, or we put expectations on certain emotions. For instance, someone dies. Other people expect you to be sad 100% of the time, but you're also a human. And so there might be times where you actually laugh, but then we feel shame because we're having a good moment, or we're really angry and then we feel shame for being angry, which makes us more angry. And so what worked for me, it was like, today is terrible and I'm acknowledging that and I'm going to move through that and I'm going to honor that. And I know it's not going to be forever, but I didn't attach any kind of feeling to it about, like I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I should feel a certain way, or I need to get out of it immediately. So if I was to say a tool would be to honor how you are feeling at any moment in time. We're humans. We're going to have the range, or hopefully we will have the range of emotions if we allow ourselves to. And I know I didn't do that when I was a kid because I didn't know how. I knew that people were either expecting me to be sad and then I needed to be happy. And so people would buy me things, people would take me places because I'm a kid. So if he's smiling, he's grieved, like that was the attachment to that. But all in my head, I was like, oh, they expect me to be this way. I can't be this way. And so that really is damaging. So I think, what I learned when my grandmother was dying was like, this is terrible. Like, this is going to be the worst thing you've experienced, but you need to move through it. You need to understand that this is part of the human experience. Like, we're born and we die, and we don't get to say how it happens or when it happens, but this could be an opportunity. And I took that as an opportunity with her. I mean, we were best friends. I'll tell you, one of the things that served me the best, and maybe this is a good tool for anyone that is facing someone that might be dying soon. About 2 months or so before my grandmother died, we had a birthday party for her. We kind of figured it would be her last. She was still coherent. She was still okay, but she was in a lot of pain. And we kind of just figured things were going the wrong direction. And I was visiting And when everyone left, we had a little party. We brought everyone in and, she loved it. It was such a great day. And I said, all right, we're going to have the conversation. We're going to do it. And I sat down and we just looked at each other for like hours and told each other everything that we ever wanted to say to each other. Thanked each other for the part that we played in each other's lives, the fun times, the hard times, the things that we learned from each other. And I was probably like mid 30s, and it was like the hardest conversation that I've ever had. But I knew when I left that day that if she died that night, nothing was left unsaid, not a thing. And I could be okay. And I was like, that's probably like my proudest moment of like anything that I've done that's like the scariest, like so much. There's a lot of fear in that, right? There's a lot. Like, how could you have that final conversation? How do you do it? And it's like, you just got to do it. And I have zero regrets. And I know she did too. And so, that really served me well. So if anyone is listening and is facing something like that, just have the conversation, as hard as it is, because why save it for the funeral? Why save it for your journal? Why save it for conversations with other people? Tell it to the person. Tell them how much they mean to you if you can, if you have that opportunity. I didn't have that with my mom. She died suddenly. Plus, I wouldn't have been able to. I was 8, like I didn't have those tools. But, if you're old enough and you have those feelings and you want to do it, because I think that's probably why when she died, I was like, there's nothing left unsaid. We've said it all, and so she can move on and I can move on. Of course, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to have all those emotions, but, I think that's probably a really great tool that I think you have to be able to do it. I think it's hard, but if you have the opportunity and you have a little bit of confidence in yourself, I would do it for sure.
Wow. What a beautiful memory. And I'm so grateful that you shared it, Matt. Honestly, yeah, just these are tears of joy because I am experiencing you sharing something so personal, and it makes me so happy that you are saying this, because I think the regret would have been definitely bigger, obviously, right? If you would not have had this amazing conversation with your grandmother. And yeah, this makes you an expert. I have got to give you 100% consent here. You are such an amazing person for doing this. You're the first person ever that I'm listening to that says this about saying goodbye at the end of the day, because this is what it means, but saying it in such a loving and in such an elegant way. It makes it, I mean, this is what life is all about, honoring the person when they are here with you, when they are alive right now, not when they're in the coffin, because I don't know, maybe they can hear you. We don't know that for sure.
Yeah. And I think I feel that society tells us to like shy away from that. Like, or we get so attached to hope that someone is going to miraculously come through and survive this particular cancer. But also, what if they don't, and take the chance? I wouldn't have regretted it if she had lived for another 10 years. I still wouldn't regret that conversation. It wasn't like we said, all right, goodbye. We said everything that needed to be said, and it felt really strong and appropriate. And I don't know. I think too many of us are afraid of that. We're afraid of the real, like I was saying on the conversations I have on my podcast, people are afraid of some of those things. They're afraid. And I think people feel more comfortable telling strangers, which is kind of sad in a way, right? Like you just come on and they feel free to share those things. But we also, like the people around us, can we say that to them? Are they going to judge me in a certain way? Is there going to be some kind of reaction that I'm not prepared for? But imagine if we all did it though. I think that fear would dissipate. people would just be used to it, right? We would be used to telling each other how we felt in a hopefully diplomatic way if it's not so great, but having a way that we communicate that's beyond just the surface level of making sure everyone feels happy at all times.
You are so right about this. And as I heard you say a few moments ago that we put shame on our feelings, we are just not taught to feel, to express our emotions.
Mhm.
And I'm here in Romania where people are mostly not taught to say what's on their minds. As you said previously, when I go to ask a friend, how are you doing? And I can see she's miserable. She's sad. She's looking downwards and she's, oh, I'm fine. I'm just,
Mhm.
how are you doing? We just are so afraid of, I think there's this stigma, Matt. I don't know what you think about this, but we think that if we are afraid, we are going to be looked at as being weak, as being not professional, not worthy, not able to be loved by other people. So let's just, as you said, fake a smile like I used to do for so many years. And this is why I basically started my podcast.
Yeah.
Stories About Fear is all about opening that flow of creativity, just expressing who you are, your emotions, say what's on your mind, because you are the only one that judges yourself at the end of the day. No one does anything. We are the ones that allow it. We participate in other people judging us because we are just not given the tools. We just don't know. And
Yeah.
sometimes, Matt, I do feel like you did when you were a child, you were 8 years old, you did not know how to process your emotions, how to cope with everything. So you were just cute, smiling in a corner, trying to please other people. And I kind of, as an adult, I would still feel the same even a few months ago when I began working more on my ego and people pleasing. But this is stuff, and society does not want this stuff, this stuffness uncovered, because some people do go into anxiety, panic attacks, and it's sometimes such a fine line, right? When you feel that I'm fine, I'm doing great, but then you uncover other things. So can you please share with us, Matt, a bit about fear? What's your take on fear? Because you said something that really spoke to me just a few moments ago. And you said that you were not afraid to have this conversation. And this, wow, this means that you were very aligned to who you were back then.
I think that moment was different. I think that moment, the fear was gone because of my previous experience with my mother's death. So I think there was a different component there. I spent the first 30 something years of my life very afraid of anything. I was afraid of making a mistake, all because of that abandonment fear that someone was going to be like, okay, you're not worthy because you messed up, and so like your mother, I'm also going to leave. And so a lot of my life was led like that. I think it served me in some ways. I think it kept me away from doing things that I probably shouldn't have done, but then also it didn't allow me to take risks. I think I was afraid of making a mistake. And I think there's still components of me that have a little bit of that fear, like you were saying. I think there's a lot in culture, in society, that we have to be performative. We have to perform to the highest standards. And if we make a mistake, we either have to make fun of it or we have to hide it. And so, I think fear is important. I think there needs to be an element of fear. I don't think I ever want to be fearless, because I think there's a safety component in fear for me. I don't know if that's true for everyone else, but I think now my version of fear keeps me aligned a little bit more. Like, don't go too off the wall or off the beaten path, Matt. That's not you, because I am this version of me, which involves growing up with so much fear. So if I was to be fearless, I don't know if I would be me. So that's a weird way of saying that, but I think it serves me well. I think it keeps me protected in a way, but I do push the boundaries a little bit more. I do step out a little bit more than what maybe society says, this is the direction you need to go to be good at this or to do this particular route. I think even podcasting is an example of that. It's very hard to do a full-time real thing in podcasting,
It
right?
is.
It's a lot of work. There's no really monetary benefit for a long time for a lot of people, or ever for a lot of people. And you and I, we're putting our vulnerabilities out there in every episode to who is listening, right? So I think there's some fearlessness in that, but also it's contained, right? I'm controlling it. So there's a little bit of fear there. So I think I have a healthy relationship with fear now, but also I think it's because of the first 30 something years of my life where I was like living in a fear that was in my head. I didn't necessarily know was fear, but it was ruling everything that I did. So, but you were mentioning before about, the culture in Romania and how people, just kind of stay on the surface. I think it's also here in America. I think it's generational. I think it's something that we just learn from our parents and our parents learn from our grandparents. And, it just keeps going there. And we're starting to break it open a little bit, I think. I think more people are talking about mental health. More people are talking about the importance of being, the word, I know a lot of people hate the word, but authentic, like just being like who you are and what you bring to the world and being okay with that and being confident in that. I think we're getting closer now, but there is still the society piece that once enough people start to do that, the society piece becomes the minority, right? And everyone else is kind of just open and free and sharing with each other all the pieces of their life and not just like the successful ones, which I'm sure you see as a podcast host. You probably have a lot of people that are like, let me come on and tell you the 5 top ways that you can, make $1 million in 2 days, and you're like, well, is that like real? Like, what are we doing here? Are we performing? Let me tell you all the things that I've won, or let me tell you like the deep seated reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Wow. I love it that you said that. I'm enjoying this so much, and you get me from crying, then laughing, then this is wonderful. Thank you for being so open, Matt. I really appreciate this so much.
It's me.
And yeah,
Take it or
I'm
leave it.
I'm enjoying this so much. And I don't know why people don't like the word authentic. I love it. Maybe I'm the minority.
I
Who
think it's
knows?
just maybe overused. And I think people use it kind of as like a throwaway, and it maybe there's a better, more specific word that could be used, but I
Yeah,
don't
I
mind it.
see what you're. Yeah,
But everyone's
yeah.
saying it nowadays.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, I want happiness. Well, what's happiness? Don't
Right.
get it into that very generic side of things.
Right.
Like, I want my life to be looking, I don't know, I want a fulfilling life. Well, what does it really mean?
Right.
I was really curious about your own journey with podcasting, because you mentioned that you would not really want to be fearless, and fear does give us so much insight. I see it, as a fear specialist. I got to study it for around 7 years now,
Wow.
and I see it like a messenger. It just tells you what you need to do or what you need to not do, what you need to avoid. It's such an amazing way of getting to know yourself better. So,
Yeah.
can you please tell us about this? It's kind of fearless in a way, your journey with podcasting. Not too many people do it. As you say, it's tough. It's challenging. Let's be honest. We are here crying our eyes out. We are just doing things that we normally would not be doing,
Right.
not in a job anyway. What's your story with the Life Shift podcast, which I'm really enjoying so much, Matt?
Thank
I
you.
am really loving your work a lot.
Thank you. So that's funny that you bring up fear. Well, it's not funny because your podcast is about fear, but the podcast started because of fear, like the actual starting of the podcast. So during the pandemic, I decided I was going to get a second graduate degree, mostly because I just had a lot of extra time on my hand, like a lot of people did. And I got my first graduate degree when I was 22, 23. What does a 22, 23-year-old know? They just do what's next, right? Like whatever comes next, you're like, okay, I'll do that until you become an adult. And so I didn't really control any of that education. I was just like, all right, whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. So this time I was like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do a communications degree. I'm going to focus on PR, but there are only 6 out of the 11 classes they tell you what you have to take. The other ones you get to choose. So I get to choose 5 classes. And so going into this time, knowing old version of Matt, I intentionally chose elective classes that scared me. I chose classes that, because the first time in school, I picked the classes that were going to be easy. Because if we think back, I needed to get A's so that people wouldn't leave me, right? Parents, family members, people wouldn't abandon me because my brain was still in that 8-year-old sense of like, got to do well. So I picked all the classes that were like, I know I'm going to do that. I took calculus in high school so that when I got to college, I took algebra. And I'm like, I know I'm going to get an A. I don't even have to go to class, right? So this time I was like, I'm going to take the ones that when I read the description of the class and I look at the syllabus, I panic. And I did. So I took I took 5 classes that all like were like, ooh, I don't know if I can do this. Like I might not get an A in this, and that's okay. Side note, I got 100% in like most of them. But I took the art of podcasting, which was an elective class, and it scared me because I was like, I don't know, do I want to talk into a microphone? What am I going to talk about? What will I do? I know we don't have to launch a podcast, but we have to do assignments based on podcasting. And so it was fantastic because what it forced me to do is it forced me to do all the things that a lot of podcasters don't, like a lot of the front end research. It forced me to research the target audience. It forced me to make audience personas. It forced me to really think on the podcast name and a 10-word descriptor and all these things that I think a lot of people just kind of jump into doing podcasting and then they learn along the way. But by doing all that front end work, now every time I do an episode, I know I keep my target audience in mind. I know what the mission of my show is, and I come back to that. I don't just kind of go wherever. And so it really served me well. And our assignments, we just had to record 2 episodes, 2 interview style episodes, a trailer. And I think that was it for like the main part of the podcast. And I was like, well, I've now figured out what I'm going to do. If I'm really going to do this for an assignment, why not just do it? So I think by the end of the course, which is 15, 16 weeks long, by the end of the course, I had 9 episodes recorded. I had already launched the podcast like 2 months before the class ended. I had the website running. I had guests lined up. And so it's just kind of been going since there. I think I've now recorded close to 80 episodes with my show. I've released 60, so I'm like way ahead, but it's the most fulfilling project I've ever created. And, we were saying this before we started recording, is you don't realize when you do a show like this, how much it's going to serve you personally. And it's really helped heal little pieces of me that I didn't realize weren't fully healed yet, or connect to little pieces that I didn't realize were stuffed back there. And so it's really just been such a wonderful journey. And weirdly so, because I think 20 years ago, version of me would think, how the heck are all these people trusting you with this story that they're telling you? Like, who are you that they want to open up and have an actual conversation with? And that's been mind-blowing to me and really super grateful for that. But it's been such a journey that started with just taking a class that I was scared of and then doing the work. And now I'm
Oh
not
my
afraid of it.
God. Oh my God, Matt, you just unlocked a new fear for me.
You're
I
welcome.
never thought of it like this. And it's brilliant. Thank you for saying this. And thank you for sharing this wonderful path with us. So it's no wonder you got into being so passionate, because you put so much work before even actually starting it. And you're right. And I was fortunate to have my mentors. They also own a podcast. They're very advanced in this, doing it for many years. And I got to learn from them, because as you say, it's so much work and no one sees it. It's like, as you thought of originally, what am I going to go there and talk into the mic? What am I going to talk about? It
That's the
seems like
easiest part.
fun, but it's just so much work. Thank you for sharing this.
Mhm.
And I'm very curious. What is your goal with your podcast? How do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years with the Life Shift podcast?
If I am that lucky, I will be so happy that it continues to go on. Right now, my plans are to stay the course. When I first started this, truly, it sounds very silly, but truly, my goal is that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most. Because if I think back to the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old version of me, I really, truly felt, maybe not know, but I felt like I was the only person or the only kid that ever had a dead parent, and that was facing that. I think I obviously knew that that happened to other people, but in my heart, I felt very alone. I felt very alone in that experience, which, when I got to high school, I met like at least a handful of people that became great friends who all had a parent that had passed away, in their childhood. And there was an instant bond. And it was like, oh, they understand how I feel. They understand this. And so with the podcast, my hope is that like someone's listening and it's like they feel really alone in their circumstance. And then they hear someone else talk about this is what happened to them and this is all the stuff that they've done since and how they've unpacked that and how they've learned from it, and that gives someone hope, that gives someone the ability to feel like, oh, I'm not the only one going through this and I can get through it. So that's my ultimate goal, is that each episode keeps finding those ears that need it. Long term, I'd love to be able to do this full time and just have the ability to have these conversations and have someone else do all the other work, right? Because like you said, it's like, I would say 8 to 12 hours per episode of work from beginning to end. And I don't think a lot of people understand that component. But yeah, I'd love for this show to go farther. I'd love to be able to help produce other people's shows based on what I've learned. I think learning by doing is very impactful. Like I said before, having that study ahead of time was super helpful. But now the hands-on, doing it in and out every week, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of different things. And if I was to sit down and write it out, it'd probably be a lot longer than I'm thinking right now, right? Of all the things that podcasting teaches you. So 5, 10 years from now, I hope I'm still having these conversations. I hope people are still trusting me to share their stories. I hope people are still listening, so it's all up from here.
Wow. And Matt, it's going to happen, because if you want to, you are going to achieve it, which brings me to the title of our episode today. I
Mm.
Can Be Anyone, A Soul's Journey. What does it mean? What inspired you to put this title on the book? Because it spoke to me so much that I need to get, a pen and a piece of paper tomorrow when it's all quiet, to think about it. I can be anyone, because I want to do so many things. So what inspired you, Matt?
So that was another journey that I was trying to find a voice, I think, before I found podcasting. And I did a lot of digital art and try to get like express. I think it's a way of expression, right? I think I wrote for a while, like when I was younger, to get those thoughts out. And then I drew for a little bit. I was in this period of where I was drawing a bunch of animals and whatnot. And then we were in this version of America that we're in now, where it's very divisive and people are telling others what they should believe, telling others how they should handle their bodies, and we're in a space in which people are not agreeing. And it really made me think, like, why can't we just be the human that we are? And why can't we do anything we want? And so what I did with this book is I wanted to kind of take these animals and share that all these animals that people love, they all have these quirky little facts about them. They all do like little weird things, and no one judges them for that. People celebrate those moments. And so each page of the book has a cute little I drew it on my iPad, but that's down there. I drew it on my iPad, and and then I have a bunch of little animal facts about each one. Basically, the idea, the soul's journey, is that like each animal has its own soul, and you can choose whoever you want to be. If you want to be an owl today, or you want to be a kangaroo tomorrow, and you want to be a flamingo the next day, be you. Do what feels right. Follow
I
that.
love that. I want to be a cat. I love that.
Be whatever you
Oh
know.
my
And
God.
I think if kids could see that, like, all these animals are celebrated and different, and people still love them, why can't they be different if they want to be, right? If that's who they are. If your daughter one day wants to play with something that people aren't all playing with, you know, if she wants to do that, that's cool. Like, I don't know. I think we're getting to a place where that's cool. I think in the past we were all told, like, you do this, boys do this, girls do this, people do this. When really, like, if we think about dolls, right? Like, girls have dolls, but don't boys have dolls too? Like, they have He-Man, they have G.I. Joe, we all had dolls. They were just named something different, right? And so that was kind of the whole impetus of how can I use my art? How can I put something together? Also, another challenge, how can I publish it myself on Amazon? How can I learn all these little things in the process? And so that's what I did. And that's what it is. And there's a coloring book that goes with it. That's the kids' book. The coloring book has the same characters, but obviously the outlines of them, so kids can do their own version of them. So
Wow, this is really beautiful, Matt. Congrats for doing
thank you.
this. This is really amazing. This is something that I want to read. I'm really
I'll
curious.
send it to you.
You need to send me the link. Yes.
I'll
And I
send
need
you the
to add
PDF.
it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I need to add it in the description of our episode because people should get their hands on this, order it from Amazon. I'm loving it. It's so much freedom of choice, and I love it. And what you said earlier just makes so much sense. For example, growing up in the countryside with my grandparents, I was not given a choice. I had no idea that I could literally have an opinion. I was in my early 20s and I was thinking, so okay, so I got hired. I had a pretty nice job back then, and I was thinking, okay, so my entire stay in the office, I need to have a fake smile on and just say that everything's okay and that I'm comfortable. I developed a heart disease in the process. I had no idea that I could literally say what's on my mind.
Yeah.
And as a child, how scary is that?
Yeah.
Growing up and not knowing that you can literally have your own personality. I would always be in a way proud that I could model
Mm.
other
Yeah.
other people, that I was a chameleon. I would say it's flexibility of behavior. It's our mind just trying to comfort us. You're not broken. You don't need to go to therapy. I was not coachable at all.
Mm.
But this thought of knowing that you have a choice, that you can, as the book says, you can be anyone. I love it. It's just so relieving, very freeing. Thank
I-
you.
I'll send you the coloring book for your daughter as well, so she can color if she
Thank
colors.
you. She does, but she'll have to share it with me.
Well, I'll send you the printable one so you can print as many as you need to. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I think if we were all the same, how boring would that be?
You're right. You're right.
Why do we want to fall in line? I think people just need to bring what they are to the table. We'll use the word again, be authentic. Bring your human experience. We all have different experiences. Let's share them. The more we share them, I think the more we kind of break down this fear of people being different from us. I think there's a lot of damage that can come with that. So hopefully we move in the other direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, as you said a few minutes earlier, it takes time, but we are kind of, shaking the
I hope so.
grounds, testing the waters. And I'm just so privileged, Matt, for our talk today. I am just very inspired. What a beautiful conversation. What an amazing human you are.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Thank you
sorry
so
that I
much
made you
for being
cry.
here. No, this was awareness because, I think, well, I don't think, I'm sure that I basically processed some things that I have not tapped into for quite a while. So thank you for this. I feel that it was some healing going on there.
Mm,
And you mentioning that you had this conversation with your grandmother, this is something that we all should do.
yep.
First of all, honor ourselves, just trust ourselves enough that we can do anything that we set our minds to. And it may seem very general. It's like make love, not war. It sounds very superficial in a way, right? But we can truly be and do anything that we want to do. Thank you for sharing all your personal experiences. Thank you for this wisdom. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I really appreciate that. And I know that our listeners and the people that are watching us on YouTube are also going to appreciate your vulnerability. And my fearless friends, I did tell you at the beginning because, yeah, this is going to be a special episode. It truly is. So I suggest that if you have been watching us and listening to us until now, if you have not gotten the pen and the piece of paper that I always carry with me on my desk, rewind, go back and take some notes because this is what I'll be doing after I wrap it up today with Matt. Matt, before we go today, where can everyone get in touch with you? Because after such a really heartfelt episode, I know that people will want to get to see your amazing work and listen to your podcast. Please tell us, where can we find you?
Sure. For the podcast, it's just the lifeshiftpodcast.com, and that should take you pretty much everywhere. It's on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the places. As many places as I can remember to put it on, it is there. And if you're on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, it's the Life Shift Podcast. And on Twitter, since it's a little shorter, it's the Life Shift Pod. So I can give you all those links and people can easily access that. But I'd love to have you as part of my circle, my community of people. I try to curate those areas as best as I can so that I feel that I can, be authentic and be myself and be as human as possible. You said the word wisdom, and I don't know if the word wisdom fits. I think, I'm just sharing my experiences and what I've learned from them. I don't know that they would work for everyone else, but at the same time, maybe one person out there hears this and is like, you know what, I need to do that, or oh my gosh, I've been living my life out of fear of abandonment and I don't need to anymore, and I can lean into things that serve me. Like you said, like do the things that bring your heart joy and do the things that serve you well. So I'd love to have people join me on this journey that I'm loving so much.
This is wonderful, Matt. And let me tell you before we wrap it up that I feel right now, as I'm comparing myself to how I felt before having our conversation about death and the grieving process and about loss, I feel so much better. Better in terms of, I feel at peace now.
Hmm.
I feel that I have been needing to hear this. So I was, the ears that
There
you
you go.
say that you want to have people to feel that. those ears, those very special ears that are needing to hear a certain message. So I
Listen,
feel that, wow, this was really healing for me today. Thank you.
you're welcome. I think what you're doing on this show is you're sharing stories. People are sharing stories, and stories have an impact, and stories can help other people. And so as long as we continue doing this and taking our journeys where they need to take us, I think we're on a good path. So thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share my journey.
A great privilege, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you.